Do we have Hajer?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, great. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you very much for UN Women for inviting me. I think when we discuss women's participation in decision-making processes, be it in politics, be it in the private sector, being it at the household as well, it is important to always emphasize that women's participation is a right. It's not something that it's giving to us. It's not something extra. It is our right as women and young women to participate in every decision-making process that affects our daily life at whatever level it is. When we look at where we are today when it comes to women's participation in decision-making processes, maybe one important thing to highlight is that the fact that women are not equally participating, it doesn't say less about us as women and young women. In fact, it says less about the decision-making processes themselves, in the sense that since Beijing until now, these decision-making processes has not changed significantly for better. And one important thing also to highlight is that perhaps there is a huge misconception in many parts of the world that these decision-making processes are merit-based. That the selection to be part of these decision-making processes are solely merit-based. And this excludes one of the reasons for why women are not able to participate or are not equally participating as men, which is privilege. Being born within a specific group and being born as a specific gender who has a track record of participating and leading and designing decision-making processes means that these processes do not really reflect, and they do not frankly look like the communities they represent. And every time I'm having a conversation with whoever it is, regardless of gender, and I say, well, in order for us women and young women to be able to participate, we need to have enabling systematic mechanisms. It can be quotas, it can be reserved seats, it can be whatever mechanism it is, but we need to have enabling mechanisms in order to overcome the structural problem. Because the fact that we're not participating equally as men, that's not our fault, it's the fault of the system in itself. And you know, sometimes when you engage in such conversation and you put forward such argument, the opposite and the counter argument will say, well, the law does not prevent you from participating, so why don't you go and run for an office? Why don't you start your company? Why don't you just, as a woman or as a young woman, simply go and participate? And my response to that is that decision-making processes are like borders. If you don't hold the privileged passport, or if you don't belong to a privileged group, it doesn't mean you can easily enter. And telling women to, you know, just go and participate as if there's no structural obstacles is as telling me, a Libyan person, to just book a ticket and travel the world. I would need a visa to go almost everywhere and to be able to enter any country. I cannot just show up at the border control and say, well, I want to get in. And the same argument applies to women and young women's participation in decision-making processes. We still do need a visa to enter these processes. And this visa, it can be a quota, it can be a reserved seat, it can be whatever it is. But the fact is, we still need this visa to enter these processes.
Thank you, Hajer. I really like the metaphor that you used there about having a visa to enter these processes. I think we all on this panel can relate to what you're saying. I was just mentioning that 30 years ago, I had my first job out of college in which I edited photos of one of our panelists, Rigoberta Menchú, today. And if you had asked me at that time, if 30 years later, would I be struggling with the issue of gender equality, coming from a privileged position, as they say, well-educated, access to opportunities in the US, I would have said, no way, we have an equal playing field. But what I have learned in my 3 decades of working and experience is it's not an equal playing field. And one thing I want to do going forward is not try to tell a younger generation that it's equal and that if you just work hard, you'll get there, because I now know that that is not the truth. I've learned it myself, and I've also learned about the unconscious bias that comes from being in such a position of privilege. I would love to ask now of Beatriz Argimon, the Vice President of Uruguay, about your experience of leadership and whether what Hajer is saying resonates for you.
Hello. First and foremost, I would like to thank you for this invitation, for me to take part in this very important event that we are conducting all together. This meeting in such a difficult time in this global society that keeps us united. This has to do with an insight that you were mentioning, of course. First and foremost, I would like to thank governments, those governments that have put this event together, and the UN, which plays a key role when it comes to making visible this gender equality subject for a long time now. And I would like to thank this intergenerational discussion. Whenever we talk about Beijing, whenever we talk about what we know as communities in this diverse world, there is something that remains very clear, and that is the fact that we're all aware of the fact that we have conducted appropriate studies from Beijing to date on what discrimination everywhere means. Therefore, I am not going to stress on this couple of minutes that I have on what is already clear to us. There are clear signs of discrimination in our society that will become more evident after the pandemic scenario. So I will not stop or, let's say, stress on some diagnoses we are all aware of, that we already have, and that are part of very specific studies that allow us to visualize what we have seen globally across different realities, and that becomes evident. We have had some progress made, however, it has taken a long time, from my perspective, for us to be able to get into that gender equality that we have identified for a long time. This is not a matter of, let's say, a struggle between men and women, as many persons would like to make us believe or put as a subject on the table. No, this means that we need to stay together as women during this time, because this is also a matter of rights. It is also a matter of democracy equality. If, let's say, the vision of half the world is, let's say, not included whenever we are deciding the future of our countries, of course that means that it's an issue that is related to democracy. And therefore, whenever we say that we are facing certain obstacles, whenever we say that there is a shift in our culture that we are going through right now, we cannot lose sight of the fact that there have been many years gone by where we have reported this situation, this reality. And in this globalized world where everything has become faster, those of us who have been going along this way for a long time, where we have seen this openness to have leaders that are women, then we also need to clearly define that we need to continue moving forward ahead with certain concrete actions more quickly. I come from a sound political system. In Uruguay, women had, from the legal statutory standpoint, very early in time we had and were entitled to our rights. However, it is also true that we have and face the same obstacles that we had identified many years ago. Of course, we have made progress, yes, but the 21st century should have just really welcomed us with a more equal society for women to be able to change their perspective, and also by enabling concrete actions that are equal and that we have requested for a long time now. Therefore, I would like to address two important facts. The fact that today these governments and the UN are bringing us together, and the fact that we are conducting an intergenerational discussion, because we need to clearly define that we are committed. Those who have been struggling with gender equality for a long time in decision-making positions have to understand and make visible the fact that it's been a long time and that we need immediate action. That decision-making process with an egalitarian view cannot take longer. And more importantly, whenever we take into account that new generations are now called to, well, of course, meet with their responsibilities, to deliver their political responsibilities at an earlier age, and social actions as well. It is not possible that after having worked so much and after gone through many things, well, we have certain regulations, and whenever we have taken this need to have a hand-to-hand work between men and women, we still need to conduct and hold this kind of conferences where, well, we cannot longer talk about diagnosis. No, we need to start just moving into these actions that we can all put in place together accordingly. I would like to talk about the after pandemic situation, where we will have to work for us to find the key tools for women who are all over the world and who remain responsible for care. As we have noticed more evidently during these difficult times, it is clear that poverty looks like women and children. After having just really come a long way after Beijing, we still see some diagnoses that are just repeating themselves, and we no longer have the time to wait in a society where the society finds us working side by side, also contributing to the GDP of our countries, and also with training, education, and even getting to an extent where a lot of the youngest women who would like to continue striving in their careers, professionally, politically, in the labor market, well, the society and the system is somehow just putting them at a certain point in time where they need to also plan their maternity, because that sometimes is seen as an obstacle. That means that the needs of those who are really committed to this social progress, they need to get into that crossroad where they need to decide what I call an authentic process of criminalization and responsibility. So women no longer have anything else to prove. Women have to move forward with decision toward those places that we need to claim. Accordingly, I believe that the post-pandemic scenario is also calling us, with no doubt, to somehow place that honorary burden that we have in our daily activities related to care that we provide free of charge, that need to become freely economically dependent without any question. We need to really be able to achieve this right equality. And that's a decision that we as women who get into that crossroad need to take. That's a decision that we need to make. And I believe that there are political stakeholders who understand that this is a natural process. I believe that it's been a long time now since that natural process reaches us just by finding diagnosis related to inequality. Therefore, my proposal is that as an outcome of this exchange with women that are looked up to by me and whose career I know and who have contributed so much with their political and social leadership, for us to develop a strategic partner so that once and for all we can start getting into definite and final action. The post-pandemic scenario is going to lead us to see that there is more poverty, and we know what happens in that circumstance. We know what an increase in poverty entails. Well, we know that usually women are the most affected and the most impacted on, as well as children, boys and girls, and therefore this strategic partnership could start today. We cannot longer just really delay this equality scenario. We need to continue finding women who just do not get there, but also those who have also included this gender perspective and equality when it comes to building the politics of our country. So I would like to end this intervention just by thanking deeply this community and just wishing that this meeting ends up with such a commitment for us to move forward with decision towards that equality that we have been longing for a long time. I am with you, and we are all on the same page. Thank you.
Such an honor to have you here, and I agree. We do need to work together on this. And as we know, poverty, as you said, poverty does have the face of women and children, and the COVID-19 pandemic has made that so much worse. As we globally come out of this, we need to work together to change this. So I'd love to get the perspective now of Helen Clark, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, who also was one of the highest level women in the UN for a long time. Prime Minister, we're seeing research on women in leadership being targets of violence. What is your view of this reality for women leaders? And sorry, Helen, one thing before you speak. If every speaker can write your name in your Zoom profile by clicking on the three dots, that way our audience will be able to see who you are. We have more than 1,000 people who have joined through the Generation Equality Forum, and many more who also have joined us on YouTube. So I know we had a little bit of a late start on YouTube. Thank you to our YouTube audience for joining us. And what an incredible turnout we have for this panel. So Helen, former Prime Minister of New Zealand, I guess, yes, we're all women leaders, but we're also just people. So can you talk about women in leadership being the targets of violence, both from your experience as Prime Minister and also from your high level that you reached in the UN organization?
Well, firstly, I think we should be concerned about what this Reykjavik Global Index is telling us about perceptions of women leadership. It's done now across the G20 countries, and it's showing, still quite a remarkable degree of resistance to accepting women as leaders, even in countries like Germany, which have had very talented women's leadership for such a long time. I mean, the proportion of people in Germany surveyed who say they're comfortable with having a woman as head of government is 41%. For goodness sake, Angela Merkel has been a leader for years, and only 41% are comfortable with this. I mean, this is quite extraordinary. So it does say that there are really some quite deep stereotypes here that women are battling when they're coming into the system. But what we can't accept is that those leadership chairs, those decision-making chairs, don't have our name on them. You know, I think it's really critical that we never suffer from imposter syndrome, asking, you know, should we be there? Yes, we should be there. We should be there because it's right and because our perspectives are absolutely essential to quality decision-making and ensuring that you know, whole communities are represented and not just, you know, the roughly half that is male. I think when you look at how women leaders have handled COVID, you see that the characteristics so often associated with women's leadership really there, showing what we can do. You know, the women leaders who've shown the empathy, who've communicated well, who haven't had the large overweening egos that haven't been prepared to listen to science, listen to advice, weigh up evidence, make decisions. You know, I mean, there's just been some incredible stars among the women's leaders, and I hope we'll get people to look at women leaders in a new light. Look, electoral systems matter in getting women into leadership. The sort of classic first past the post system as still pertains in the United Kingdom, United States, Canada is not so conducive to women breaking through. My own country got a really quite remarkable breakthrough with women's representation when it moved from that old Westminster UK system to proportional representation. We're now up to 48.5% of our parliament is female without quotas. But let's come to quotas. If your country's not making progress fast, go to quotas. They do work, and many countries have tried them and are getting results from them. For women, I think entry into decision making is often thwarted by lack of access to resources. And if political parties are serious about backing women in leadership, they're going to have to make sure that those women's campaigns are properly funded. They also need to support women against the threats of political violence when they run, because women can be more susceptible to that. And you know, what more graphic demonstration could there be than the tragic assassination of Benazir Bhutto in Pakistan all those years ago. So yes, there are obstacles, there are stereotypes, there is stigma. But if we just say, well, that's the way it is, and we're not going to try, that's not good enough either. We have to build the alliances and the networks of women and men who will back women to work their way into these systems and change them. You know, not just adapt to these systems the way they are, but go in there to change and make it easier for future generations to come through. I think that would be my message.
Thank you so much. I think the issue of quotas is really interesting. In some ways, in English, the word quota almost has a stigma attached to it. It would be nice if there was another. I liked how our earlier speaker called it reserved seats. Hajer Sharif said reserved seats, which I find to be perhaps maybe something that doesn't create the Can you hear me? Okay, thank goodness. All right. So as I was saying, it's a wonderful world of technology that we live in today. So again, we're going to now to Inez Yabar, who's a sustainability activist. I'm going to ask you to speak a little bit about how we achieve a feminist agenda of leadership, go beyond the focus on women's leadership, and ensure a diverse, inclusive, and intersectional forms of leadership for all members of society. This is so important. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. And thank you for having me today. I'm really humbled to be with so many inspiring women that I look up to. And at just 25 years of age, I have to pinch myself and think, am I really in this space and discussing women who have done so much already? And I hope to achieve as much as well. I am a sustainability activist, but that goes as well with sustainability as an ecology, but sustainable cities includes also working in poverty. And I work with Techo, which is an organization in Latin America helping people overcome poverty. And 76% of the leaders in the communities we work with are women. And I think that is very powerful to know that women in shanty towns are the ones leading, and they're the ones bringing ahead their communities and helping them overcome poverty. And this is something that goes across, as you were saying, intersectionality. It goes across all areas of society. And I think there is a problem if women aren't being recognized for their leadership at any level. And they're just being sometimes applauded, sometimes their voices are amplified, but they don't really have the actual resources. They can't generate that momentum that we're asking for to be part of that decision-making space and have leadership roles at higher level. I was at a webinar a couple of weeks ago, and they were mentioning how only 13 countries have had more than one woman lead, and only 2 of them had 3 women lead. So where's the issue where we come from women leading in their communities on the ground, and then they can't go further? What's happening when they reach higher stages? I am from Peru, and 30% of the parliament seats are held by women, and we have elections in 2 weeks. And I think something really important is to see that it's our role as well to elect those women into spaces. Unfortunately, only 4 women out of 33 candidates, or 4 of the candidates are women out of 33, but they are there. And I think it's our role as well to recognize that they are in these spaces. They are everywhere. Women, as we've been saying from the beginning, are 50% of humanity. So we are in every sector, we are everywhere, and we are working and we are doing things. And it's up to us to recognize those women, to see them, to understand what the issues are that we have in whatever sector of society we work in. I'm also working with a lot of young people in different countries that recognize this gender issue and the gender gaps in their communities. Recently, I was working with many young people from Kenya who were just saying how child marriage and period poverty and lack of access to education were the ones that weren't allowing them to reach their full potential. So what can we do to help them? And I'm really grateful to be inspired by a lot of young activists from around the world, including my friend Amika George, who just launched a book called Make It Happen. And she managed to make in the UK period poverty something kind of the past, and there's still lots of work to do, but now anyone in any school can access period products for free. And so I think there's a lot that we can do as young people, there's a lot that we can do as women, there's a lot that we can do as men, to just see where are the issues in your community, what are the things that you can do to make sure that women in whatever sector of society they're in, and in whatever sector of work or in any of the roles that they have, what is it that's preventing them from reaching higher levels of power and of influence? And women are there, but right now they're at the stage where they're just being applauded. And now it's time to make it normal. Why are not young men seeing these young women in those spaces more? And why isn't something that has become normal? I think the fact that we're all here today demonstrates that women are in positions of power, but now are we really being listened to? is what we're saying really being taken into account? And that's what I think we should now work towards, is recognizing that women are reaching certain positions, but they're still an exception, and we don't want it to be that way. So I would challenge all of those of you listening. Thank you, Christy.
No, you're doing great, and I agree so much with what you're saying. That not only do we need a seat at the table, but we need to be heard and listened to when we get there. And I don't want to cut you off. I want to respond to what you're saying, because I myself have been cut off and not heard, and it's hard to believe for some people watching, but you can accomplish a lot and still not be heard frequently. I also really appreciated what you had to say about period poverty. I myself, in my third decade of working, find that there's no easier way to freeze one of your male colleagues than by suggesting that there be free tampons in the bathroom. But that still is not the case in many places. And as we know, period poverty has more serious consequences than in our New York office buildings. I would love to be able to have time to come back to everybody once we've gone through our 10 panelists. We're more than halfway through, so thank you everybody for sticking to the time. And next, I'd like to follow up on a point that you made about percentages and parity in leadership with Carmen Calvo, who is the Vice President of Spain. I'd like to ask you, we still have only 25%. From your experience, what will work to achieve parity, and should quotas be mandatory? As Helen raised, what should we do about quotas? Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. It's such an honor for me to be able to share these insights with you, this work with you. I would like to greet everyone from my country. I believe that we are talking about women from different ages, from different places in the world. And I believe that we should just say hello and thank you to everyone, to all those women who have put all of their efforts to just really open a way or set a path for us as women, for them to be able to enable a strong presence of women in the society. I believe that sexist societies that continue to discriminate women all over the world very frequently forget our history. Every time we are us in a certain position, we know that someone was there before us. That makes us stronger. That makes us feel more comfortable because we know that others are in the same place. And that somehow forces us to be committed to the youngest generations, those who are about to come. That leads us to think that the leadership of all women somehow needs to be different, and we also need to try to have some sort of an updated view on how the world works. Everything is interconnected. We also need to have leadership that somehow gets rid of some, let's say, some sort of selfishness for us to be able to work globally for everyone, men and women. And accordingly, it would be very important with the leading and guiding of the UN for all of us to be able to progress, to strive, and to notice and to find out that we all need to do many different things in different positions, cultures, and places in the world. However, I believe that women in the 21st century need to incorporate a greater vision of life, that it's deeper and more human. I believe that leadership is not a matter of bureaucracy. I believe that it is a mandatory requirement of democratic societies, and also a mandatory requirement of the need that we as women have of being our own voices, of just being capable ourselves to identify what we need, how our rights are moving forward, our expectations, our opportunities as well. Men have never had any sort of meritocracy for them to be able to see how to do this in their own life and history. And it is true that Helen was talking about this, Beatriz was mentioning this as well. We need to really have a stronger stand whenever we are entering a certain location. We need to be more confident, because if we do not just really include the content that we need for our agenda in our country, then we're going to do everything at a slower pace, and that is despairing and frustrating. I believe that we can call it equality as quota, egalitarian democracy, positive democracy. In Spanish, well, we know that the word discrimination is quite complex. Anyway, we need to make efficient decisions. Equality of our rights, of our leadership is fair. It's a matter of fairness, human rights, and not having, let's say, societies that are really attending to half the population of the world, meaning women. Then it is useless. It is not efficient for a society where we are not leading, we are not the main character or the spokespersons of our own expectations and somehow our hope. Without this, we know that the society without women is going to be absolutely unbalanced. For that reason, we need to work efficiently, and with that, we need to include in every country's laws some legally mandatory decisions, let's say in electoral or voting lists, also in the state's bodies, where there could not be over 60% of a gender or 40% of another gender. I am the vice president of a government that is half incorporated or constituted by women. Well, we have advanced laws that has taken a lot of effort so that a lot of things are not done without this. And actually achieving this degree of presence, as Ines was saying, well, we still need to be heard and also to somehow influence, to have this capacity, to have an appropriate political strength so that we can really address issues according to our own perspective. We have all stated this. I believe that we are all going to address this. This pandemic is impacting on us, more importantly and more significantly on us, because we were just barely progressing in certain areas. So for that reason, it is very important that we have women in the first line of politics, so that it is ourselves as women who can decide what is going to happen with children, with the sexual attacks, with violence against us, with the labor market, and with the types of works where we are in, what happens with technologies and with new jobs where we are designing the world and where we see none or very few women in that world, where we are just continue to move forward towards the future. But I believe that it is a matter of rights, a matter of mandatory politics, a matter of the struggle that we as women have to make. It's not that we're fighting men. No, we are striving to improve our coexistence models, our models of human rights that are also our human rights. And for that reason, I believe that we do not need to rely a lot on on theory, but on action. In international forums, in UN Women, the UN, we are demanding very quickly that this changes the world, that the foreign policies and politics of our countries in terms of conflicts, international agreements, and all of that is included into our women's perspective. And I believe that everything that we have is very important, and we still need to really play our traditional roles, the traditional roles where women were not citizens, where we did not have any rights or freedoms. And now with these new roles where we are also citizens, where we are workers, leader women, and doing both things is very difficult. It takes up a lot of time. It just really takes up a lot of effort. For that reason, our leadership, our presence need to help us, just for us to be able to look after this state politics, such as well-being, health, so that women is not only devoted to, let's say, maternity, being a wife or being a daughter or a wife just to provide care for everyone else. It is the role of the whole world. There is no other humanitarian role that would lead us to that. And I would like to finish by saying that in spite of this pandemic, which is a crisis, I would like to really finalize just with a positive perspective. I believe that day after day, we are more and more women who are aware and confident and who know how we would like to live our freedom, our strength day after day. We are more active, we are participating, we are putting more pressure. We are now going out to the streets. Right now we cannot do that, but we are out there to demand our rights and to complain whenever something happens. In London, very recently, a lady was murdered. So that strength is the strength that is going to mobilize the world. For that reason, I would like to finish with a positive perspective, because I have the absolute impression that for us to be able to mobilize and improve this world is no longer going to be stopped.
I appreciate it. I apologize to our audience where our translation has not been working for the last few minutes, and we're working to fix it. Thank you so much. We have a few questions from the audience that we'd like to get to toward the end. And we also have 4 panelists that we have to hear from. So next I'll turn it to Olga Sanchez Cordero, who is the Minister of the Interior of Mexico. The Global Equality Forum is civil society centered and places a big focus on youth and feminist movements. Why are youth and feminist movements the focus of the forum? And can you talk about how important it is for civil society and youth to participate in this?
Thank you very much.
Good morning. Welcome everyone to this opening event of this Generation Equality Forum that was convened by UN Women and co-chaired by the governments of France and Mexico. This forum is part of this history of this multilateral effort to achieve equality that began in 1995 with the 4th World Conference on Women in Beijing. And a fun fact is that during that year, actually, I entered the Supreme Court of Justice in my country. I stayed there for about 21 years as the only woman amongst the 11 members of that Supreme Court of Justice. It was back then when I was part of the Supreme Court of Justice where I introduced this gender perspective when trying a case. It's, 26 years ago, this term gender perspective was about to get coined. And this term, gender perspective to try a case, was somehow really unknown for judges, but we were successful to introduce this topic in my Supreme Court in my country. So, after many years, my efforts continue. The specific strategies and approaches that we may see arising during these days are also going to take part of this forum that is going to be completed next June in Paris. We're going to also check this in the 66th General Assembly of the UN Assembly. This forum is an intersectorial or cross-sectorial meeting, intersectional and intergenerational forum, as we are noticing for gender equality. The main characters are young people, the civil society, feminists, as they are leading this event. And that's how we celebrate the power of activism and feministic solidarity. We recognize the aspirations of women all over the world. In this forum, we have the work of the civil society, governments, the academia, international bodies, collectives, community groups, corporations, parliaments, unions, and the media, and more. We have started and kicked off our activities urgently, not in order to just start to organize promises and roadmaps, no, but by making a proposal to put specific and concrete actions in place. We have already addressed the fact that we have a lot of diagnoses already. At times, I would even say that we are overdiagnosed. For that reason, it's time to take action, to really start taking concrete actions and continue moving forward with them. This COVID-19 pandemic just made this inequality situation more evident. This is a situation where a lot of women continue to live, and it has also restated the conviction that without women's participation in all arenas in the society under equal conditions, it would not be possible to achieve development and peace in our nations. The global agenda and the mainstreaming of actions related thereto need to be also translated into gender equality by also being aware of a new future. We are right now at a key point in time where we need to start building new ways of having more influence for us to be able to develop a system that was not initially conceived for women to be able to actually set the pace of the global actions to be taken. Accordingly, in Mexico, we are working according to a country project that prioritizes human rights and a fight for essential and key equality. For that reason, we listen to all women to translate their concerns into concrete actions in domestic and foreign policies. I would like to state how honored and thankful I feel for all of those women, like we've already mentioned it here, for those women who have strived for us to be able to meet right now, leading women who have been confident, have been very honorable, and I would like the women of the future to be the same, to follow the same principles. So, our current generation, I would like to address this word. This is a struggle that will continue, a fight that will continue. We will not leave it. We need to recognize equality because we are all equal beings. Lastly, I would like to make a call to urge everyone, all organizations, and participating institutions to take advantage of this forum to build a world where no woman is left behind, where no woman is left out. And to share what I've already shared during our opening ceremony in Mexico right now, we have an egalitarian Congress, and we also have a presidential cabinet with our president Andrés Manuel López Obrador for the very first time in our history. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Interior Minister. We have 3 speakers that we will hear from. Next, we have Rigoberta Menchú, Nobel Peace Prize laureate 1992, for her work on behalf of the rights of Guatemala's indigenous people. How has this work as an advocate shaped your view on leadership? I think we might be having a problem with the sound right now.
It's such an honor and such a pleasure to be here with such distinguished women who are pathfinders of this fight of women all over the world. We have had our victories thanks to the fight by women, leading women, and thanks to the political team of women. It is thanks to them that in many corners in the planet, women have been able to build processes, political participation processes, comprehensive development processes. No public policy would have worked without the pressure and fight and participation of women. And also, no conflict would have come to a resolution without the engagement of women. For that reason, I would like to highlight today that women have fought. And I have certified this in Latin America, all over the world. I've seen a lot of women's movements who have made this participation possible. I would like to stress on the fact that it is not enough what we have achieved so far. For that reason, I would like to also give homage to these 25 years of Beijing. I was present at the time. I was there with that hope that we would be able to build a path of processes that would make our women more honorable. First and foremost, I would like to greet the government of the city, Mexico City, for inviting me, for having me here. Thank you so much. Thank you, UN Women, for your invitation. And more particularly, I would like to thank UN Women Guatemala. Thank you so much for being so open as UN Women Guatemala to have even opened an Indigenous Women platform. As part of that platform, we have noticed that we have already had 7 generations of women, Indigenous women. These 7 generations have the main objective not only of strengthening leadership that we have seen for many decades now, but also to strengthen new generations in the fight to dignify women. I would like to greet UN Women Guatemala and UN Latin America as well, and congratulate them. Right now, we are called to give our deep insights on the women who have really been able to make the full exercise of their rights. How much we have progressed and how much we are willing to progress even further. What type of partnerships we could reach first for us to be able to strengthen the influence that we have already made. I believe that we as women need to also value that influence. We also need to feel the pathfinders of that influence. However, I agree that we need to strengthen new ways to influence on decision-making processes, political ones, in having more political participation. But also, none of this would have a comprehensive result without an economic policy that would focus on benefits for women. Women with no jobs, they cannot claim participation equality. Women with no economic development perspective, a comprehensive one, they cannot claim participation. And therefore, stressing on their comprehensive economic development for women needs to become a goal of our future fight. We also need to massify benefits for women. We have already somehow achieved progress in many countries. We have seen this participation equality at times forced and imposed in terms of equality. We also have in many countries the presence of women in the use of technology, economies as well at a high level. We also have seen this women's participation, but this participation remains a privilege. How can we massify these benefits for women? Well, we need to, of course, go through public policies, but also through economics. I believe that the solution for everyone would be found in a comprehensive development. The UN has a comprehensive agenda today. What I wanted to do was to join the voices that we are raising so that we can be a model of this fight, for this fight to continue. I do not agree with the fact that we're going to see the end of this fight, because the end of this fight is infinite. Therefore, our main agenda needs to be renewed consistently, permanently, and more especially facing this collaboration. We have seen everywhere that we have increased violence against women. And everywhere we have noticed that there is impunity and abuse when it comes to prosecuting those persons who may be liable of crimes. And therefore, women need to be even stronger, fiercer to combat violence, to demand full justice, dignified justice against violations against women. I would like to congratulate the work of many women related to campaigns against discrimination and inequality. I believe that these campaigns have had great influence, whether publicly or privately held, or even from the academia. I would like to congratulate you for this participation. I believe that no women's fight becomes successful with the participation of women themselves. So today, as part of this 25th anniversary of the Beijing Conference by the UN, I would like to take advantage of this moment to invite all women in the world to take part in this fight, to take part with their efforts, their initiatives, with their own fights, for them to be inclusive. Because we cannot longer just continue to exclude against ourselves because we are reporting this type of situation. So full participation and engagement is key. I think that the example of Guatemala, where we have seen that UN Women has this platform of indigenous women that dignifies the collective right and individual right. And we know that this is key as well. We hope that we can replicate this in many more regions. And this would be possible because UN Women may be, at least to me, it's one of the most important agencies of the UN for the recent times. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share my experience over these past 30 years, me as a Nobel Prize winner. And it's very difficult. It has been very hard. At times we believe that our fight is just a source of frustration. Why? Because we have seen that the pandemic has led to a lot of women who have been affected and impacted on by it, especially women living in rural areas. Right now, I would like to also just honor women who have also played a key role even during this pandemic, more especially in Guatemala. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I agree with you that the fight is not going to end. It's not, the end is not in sight. We're overcoming thousands of years of gender and inequality and other types of intersectional inequality, including socioeconomic and race injustice. I'd like to turn now to Aminata Touré, the former Prime Minister of Senegal. Can you help us summarize what needs to happen going forward? After we hear from you, we will also hear from one of our youth leaders, Amanda Nguyen, but let's start with you, Prime Minister. What's your perspective on what our different stakeholders need to do?
Well, thank you very much. Let me express a little bit of a frustration that I'm sure will be shared across the board. Why are we repeating the same thing over and over again since Beijing and not achieving what we would like to achieve? And that's really the question we have to face. In many parts of the world, including here in where I'm talking from, Africa, we are left with the idea of whether we should accelerate change, but we realize that we are in a situation where we need to preserve advancement, which is not what we were expecting. Many of the rights that we fought for and we acquired are under threat. And it's not only in Africa, but it's in many places. So we need to link our reflection to the global equality agenda in which gender equality would prosper. We have seen very developed countries, I won't cite any for diplomatic purposes, where leaders, sort of got elected despite derogatory words toward women, despite accusation of violence against women, yet they got elected with huge numbers. We've been seeing very conservative and even aggressive speeches in places where we didn't used to do that. So I think it's very important that we address the global agenda when it comes to equality, to tolerance, to anti-racism, and linking to gender equality. We cannot separate those agendas too, because of organizational purposes. Even in a government, you have to have.
I think we're having a bit of a sound and connection problem here. So I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're having trouble hearing you. It seems to be maybe an unstable connection. But let me see if we can come back in a few minutes. I apologize for this. Next, I'm going to ask Amanda. Amanda, I'll come back and ask you to wrap it up if you would be able to, Prime Minister. In between, I will ask Amanda Nguyen, the CEO and founder of RISE, to talk to us about your story, living through something traumatic. But can you really focus on telling us how, as one of our youth leaders, you think women and women leaders in particular can harness obstacles that they face and turn them into drive? And then we will come back to the Prime Minister.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me, for putting on this event. It's so wonderful to be able to connect with people, especially since it feels like a decade, but for the past several months, over a year now, we have been living in this pandemic. And so to be able to reach out through the screen and to be with one another, I just want to say thank you. Quite simply, you can't be what you can't see. And to break down gender bias, we must acknowledge that women's equality, and in many places around the world, women's equality is still swept under the table. Peace is not the absence of visible conflict. In order for there to be true peace, access to justice for women is a necessary prerequisite. I am a rape survivor, and that is an issue that is still working through societal stigma. Survivors' lives are the invisible war zones that corrode human potential, hold back the promise of a just world. And we, all of us, have the ability to hold a light up to that darkest corner of human experience and allow survivors at last to be seen, to be heard, to be empowered. The world is going through a moment of reckoning right now. And just as we've seen in the wake of so many disasters, COVID-19 is being trailed by a surge of domestic and sexual violence. And we know that we are as strong as the weakest among us. That's why my team and I have been fighting for sexual violence to be a priority among world leaders in the form of a United Nations General Assembly resolution, a universal sexual assault survivor Bill of Rights. And that's because at least 1.3 billion people are raped around the world, but there exists no international form of accountability. Hope, to me, is a renewable resource, and we are all connected. Men included must step up because women's issues impacts them too. I want to end with gratitude because my mother fled as a boat refugee from Vietnam, and today I get to be in this space with leaders like you, talking to people from all around the world who have tuned in because they want to see a better world. And this is the dream of my ancestors. The first time that I shared my story with anyone, it was hours of me talking to politicians, world leaders who could not care less. They told me very honestly, oh, they're working on a re-election, so this wouldn't help them win. This is not a priority for them, or that women's issues wouldn't help them climb the ladder of power as fast as they would have. And at least thank you for their honesty. But as someone who was fighting for my human rights, it was devastating. I went home and I cried. And as a pathological optimist, the next morning I got up and I did the same thing. This time I went to the United States Senate. And in my ride there, I met a driver, a man who was kind of intimidating. And he didn't really talk to me. But at the end of the ride, he saw I was going to the Senate. So he asked me why. And I told him. And this once intimidating man started crying, just tears welling up in his eyes. And he turned to me and he said, "My daughter was also raped." And when he stopped the car, he said, "She went through a lot of similar things that you went through. Can I shake your hand? Thank you so much for fighting for my daughter. Has anyone told you that they love you today? I love you." And I'll never forget that dad. That dad, that father, represents our collective story. It's a story of progress. And it shows that we must do this together. Our work in gender-based violence, in fighting for women's equality, is not isolated to just women. It, of course, affects everyone: men, children, girls, boys, non-binary individuals, others. And I want to say that no one is powerless when we come together, and no one is invisible when we demand to be seen. So thank you so much for holding this Generation Equality Forum so that more than half of the population gets seen, because we are still having our issues shoved under the table. And finally, thank you so much for including my voice and including so many perspectives today. Thank you for seeing me today.
Thank you very much, Amanda. We have, I'm going to try to go back to Aminata, the Prime Minister of Senegal. But if she's back on, I'm not sure if she is.
Yes, I am.
Oh, great. Thank you. And I apologize. There was an issue with the interpretation channel. So thank you for coming back. And then after you summarize for us, I will introduce our wrap up. So thank you.
Well, I don't know how much I was heard when I was speaking, but I was saying that allowed me to just express a little bit of a frustration that is, I'm sure, widely shared. And it's related to the pace we are moving on gender issues. And sometimes you have the feeling that we are not moving as fast as we should. So the question should be, why is it that? And one of the answer I'm trying to put on the table is that maybe we need to further link the gender equality agenda to the bigger agenda about equality per se, and tolerance and fight against racism and discrimination. Because what we have witnessed in the past, I would say 5 to 6 years, I don't want to cite any country, we have seen from very sophisticated country, leaders insulting women and yet get elected. We have seen leaders being very derogatory to people living with handicap or being racist, yet they would gather huge number of votes. So why is it that? So we cannot prevent ourselves from questioning the environment, the international environment or local environment that we are operating our program related to gender equality. I think that effort to link the fight for gender equality to other struggle for equality per se needs to be further enhanced. The other point I would like to put on the table is, how can we be strategic to get the changes faster that we want? Here in Senegal and in Africa, 70% of the population is below the age of 35. Here in Senegal, the past days, you have heard that over the news, we face a youth riot, very violent one, and they came out as in big numbers because they're overwhelming when you look into the demographics. So if women who are more than half of the population, I mean in Africa at least, plus youth who are 70% of the population, why aren't we able to build alliances that would be able to win a position, political position, and make the changes we want. And these are both two groups who have direct interest in changing, the patriarchal system that is discriminating women and young people. So that has to be reflected. That's why I salute the spirit of this forum. And I guess that's also the attempt of linking both agenda of women and youth. I think it's vital if we want to accelerate the progresses. And the last point I want to make is we have moved in many, many, many fronts. In Senegal, 78% of the parliament is made of women. After Rwanda, more than 50, I think there are 53, South Africa. But yet, the changes don't necessarily reach the most vulnerable women. It's captured by privileged women like me and others. So how are we going to make sure that we have a good intersection between gender equality, social equality, of course, race equality? We say that in the literature and in theory. I'm not very sure we're delivering that in program and in effectiveness. So that is also something we need to look at. And the last point I like to talk about is how are we going to make sure that we make the necessary progress, needed progress in the context of COVID when it is about access to resources. I think it is going to be a key battle for the gender equality agenda. So more than ever, we have to come back and question the budgets that are being voted by Parliament, the allocation for gender equality and women-related activities and needs and rights. I think in this context of COVID, where all budgets are being cut, it's very, very important that we do so. So my final word would be, if we are able to put together a group that can win election everywhere, then we will be able to make the changes. And for me, it's really looking into an alliance internationally, locally, between women and young people, and setting, our electoral list rights and taking over. I think that's the best way to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And what an excellent summary. You really put it all together. Now I'd like to introduce Phumzile Mlambo Nguka, who is the Executive Director of UN Women, who has done so much as an advocate for the rights of women and girls around the world. She has some closing remarks for us. And then after we hear from Phumzile, we will ask our youth leaders, our three youth leaders on the panel, for one sentence for their summary and inspiration for us. So this will give you time to prepare. Thank you, Phumzile, for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, for keeping us on track. Thank you to everybody who has tuned in. I am coming in from Mexico, where we have just opened the forum. It's been wonderful to listen to all of you. We are having this forum just after the Commission on the Status of Women, which also focused on the theme of women's leadership and participation. And the nations of the world at CSW called for and committed to effective and equal participation of women. They even called for 50-50 representation of women in all decision-making bodies, not just in the public sector, but even beyond the public sector. They also called for participation by young women and women with disabilities. They also said it is a right for women to participate in the governing of their own countries. I think we have to be holding them accountable, supporting them to make this happen, and taking our rightful role in pushing for the implementation of these very strong recommendations. As Vice President Kamala Harris said, women actually enhance democracy when they participate, because democracy is not quite what it should be when some of those whose decisions and lives, who are affected by the decisions that are taken without them being in the decision-making process, are just left unchallenged. So this is our chance to challenge the absence of women in decision-making bodies, as well as to support the way forward that will make sure that women are adequately represented. It's been wonderful to hear some of the very concrete statements that you have made about what women's leadership means, what women's leadership needs for Indigenous women, for young women, and also what the responsibility of those of us who are in position is, in order to make sure that we are not the first and the last in the positions that we are in, but we are rather door openers for others to take. Generation equality is about action. We want to mark an era where we are not only talking and making statements, but we are committing to action. So in the context of leadership and participation of women, the Action Coalition on Feminist Movement and Leadership has to be our hope to make sure that what we are discussing here, what has been said by CSW, is acted upon and it becomes actions. We cannot only hope, because hope is not a strategy. Hope becomes meaningful when it is acted upon, and action coalitions are there to make sure that the hope that we rightfully have is converted into a strategy that we implement. We also are in an era in generation equality where we are fostering allyship. That is why we are so broad. We have women, we have corporations, we have philanthropies, we have academics, we have member states, we have the UN. We are a broad force and we are allies. We also want investments. That is why we have calculated every action that we take. We have calculated what it would cost to implement it. And we're asking and demanding that someone else pay for what needs to be done. We are an action-oriented movement because we also are concerned about timeframes, because in the last 25 years, progress has been slow and we are done talking. We want pace, we want speed, and we want to make sure that by the time we reach 2030, we have made a difference. And I will not end by not highlighting the issue of violence against women, which is everywhere. Women who are standing for leadership position suffer intimidation, physical violence, cyberbullying, and they suffer together with their families. And that reduces the appetite that women have for leadership, and that has to end. Young women are also kept out of position because of age limitation. We have to address that, because that too frustrates young women and it kicks women out of leadership. We also heard from Crown Princess Mary about the fact that every woman deserves the position that they have. We must make sure that it is understood that women's participation and leadership is not a favor, nor is it revolutionary. It's a baseline. It's where we start. It's good corporate governance. And in many bodies where people are not represented, when decisions about them are being taken, this would not be acceptable. So we should go forward and of course, take into account the intersection, which has been highlighted so able by Prime Minister Aminata, who highlights the need for us to work together with all the other causes that are fighting for rights. And that is also what generation equality is about. So we are starting and we are unstoppable. And I thank you so much for giving us these rich deliberations in this section. Thank you.
Thank you, Lile. Such incredible words. I want to follow up on your mention of opening doors and paying it forward, and open the door for one sentence each, hopefully to sum up. We know you have a lot more to say, but one sentence, if you can, Hajer Sharif, for what should inspire us all today.
It's a question, and my question is, why are we still accepting decision-making processes that do not look like us? Simply why?
Thank you. Inez Yabar.
Mine is an encouragement to all the women listening to us. People are in leadership because they are technically able, and women are technically able. So no dream is too big and nothing is too big in terms of setting a standard for yourself and becoming the leader. And it's a challenge to men to let us be those leaders.
Thank you. Amanda Nguyen.
Unstoppable. Zile, that really resonated with me. So I just want to say I am hopeful and that there is nothing that we can't do together.
And now I want to thank everybody for joining us. For some of us, it's nighttime. For others, it's the middle of the day, and others, it's morning. This really has been a global panel. Is there anybody else before we sign off who has one sentence to summarize our action that is needed, or a question, what is happening? Okay.
What's gonna be next?
Good question. So I do want to thank all of our speakers and panelists today. I know that we all have a lot of action to do, and there is so much more to discuss in the coming days at the forum as this group comes together virtually. So thank you so much. I look forward to the coming conversations, and look forward to seeing and/or meeting all of you in person. I hope sometime soon. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you for bearing with us through technical difficulties, and I very much feel the call to action that you've all asked us for today. That's our obligation and our privilege to be able to meet that call to action. So thank you.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
De un siglo a otro, pasamos de demostrar que podemos liderar a demostrar que tenemos que liderar y formar parte de todas las decisiones a las que nos enfrentamos en este mundo.